Hi and welcome to Giggles and Coffee. My name is Isabel and I'm your host. Christie grew up in Northeast Ohio. She studied marketing and psychology at Kent State University and started climbing in her 20s. Her new passion led her to travel throughout the US, Mexico, Thailand, and Spain, and eventually settle in Colorado, where we met. Though there have been stretches in our lives of not seeing each other, last summer we spent a lot of time together in Grand Junction. Training at the gym was merely an excuse to talk for hours about all the things and with no filters. Christie feels kind of like an older sister to me. I admire her. The life she's created with her family, the way she approaches climbing, how she treats her daughter Marissa, and her relationship with her sweet husband Michael. Christie sent the Path 513C in rifle at age 44, 1 year after giving birth to Marissa. At the time, this was her hardest route. Then, at age 48, she did Magnatar and Tomb Raider, also in rifle, both 513Ds. Her family spent a lot of time in Spain, where we got to climb with them and also meet her incredible mom, Joni. Sadly, she passed away not too long ago, but thankfully within the comfort of Christie's own home. It took time for Christie to be ready to speak about her mom's death on my podcast. And when she was, she said, "I thought about what my mom would say, and she would have told me to do it." In this episode, we talk about things that probably most of us try not to think about: aging, death, and losing a loved one. Topics that occupy many of our minds, whether consciously or not, but are hard, scary, yet inevitable. My dad is turning 80 this year. He is strong, his mind fresh, young at heart, and his memory incredible. I mean, he can recall facts from history class from second grade and can tell you exactly what is going on politically across the entire world. But the fact is, he's getting older. My parents seem to like making jokes about how they're the next ones on the line, and I get upset when they talk like that. I don't want to be reminded of the elephant in the room. But I guess for them, it's one way of dealing with the fact that they have lost a lot of friends their age and even younger. Sometimes it can feel as though death is just around the corner waiting to take them away from me, and each time I get to see them is becoming more and more precious. I don't think anyone can prepare us for the moment we have to let go of someone we love so deeply. But we can share and listen to each other's stories and remember that we're not alone. No one is exempt from losing someone close. And though we will always miss them, with time, the pain little by little becomes less.
No, seriously, what am I doing with my life?
How did that come across? Did they hear me?
I feel like I'm losing my fucking mind.
You're messed up.
I need to just Netflix and chill.
Like, I'm gonna meditate like a badass.
It's just like this psychotic break, and then I get my period, and I'm like, oh, it was just your period again.
Am I the only one feeling this crazy? Here we are.
Here we are.
Here we are, Christie. You know, it's funny. It's taken me only an entire summer to convince you to be on my podcast, and you still don't look very convinced.
Well, here we are. We're going to try it out.
We're going to try it out. And on top of that, I'm like, no, Christie, it's going to be so great. It'll be so easy. Just a conversation. And then I ask you to talk about a topic that is not necessarily lighthearted. I wanted to talk about age and getting older and mortality, and you're like, all right. First you have to convince me to be on your show, and now we're gonna talk about
death. Yep, here we are.
But I have to say, so just to say, I feel that the inspiration for me came from all these really cool conversations that we've had, very vulnerable, very deep conversations about life, about our parents, about climbing. And I appreciate those conversations so much. You have felt to me like kind of like the older sister that I never had, you know? And I think that's why I was really drawn to do this episode with you, because I felt like the things that we talked about in these conversations are things that other people feel and think about and could possibly relate to. And it's not a topic that people like to talk about a lot.
No, it's a hard one.
It's a hard one.
It's painful sometimes.
It's very painful. I mean, just the fact that life is so fleeting, and there are these moments in life, which, you know, little by little we'll get to, that remind us how, yeah, we're all in this together. And, you know, death is like the one certain thing. And yet I feel like society does not like to talk about it. I don't think that people like to talk about death, think about death, and accept the fact that we're not in control.
No, I think you're right about that. It's a scary topic for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And until you're faced with it, I think, either yourself or through losing or knowing you're going to lose someone you love, you don't really want to think about it.
Yeah.
You know, until you're really forced to.
Yeah.
And then that's a difficult time.
And it's not something that we can like really prepare for. However, I do feel like having these open conversations are just helpful, even just knowing that, you know, you're not alone, and that other people are having similar fears or anxieties about getting older or losing someone or making the right choices in their life. And I think that's another thing with you, aside from the fact that, you know, you have felt like a sister to me in that sense, to be able to share with you openly about my experiences with my parents this summer, or, you know, getting older and thinking, oh gosh, am I doing the right things in my life? Aside from that, you also just simply have been a true inspiration to me.
Wow, thanks, Isabel.
You really, I mean it. I truly mean it. Like, I look at you, I appreciate the choices you've made in your life. I love how you go at life. I love how you have, you know, you have that strong sense of yourself and your direction and your goals, you know, whether it's climbing or your family life or traveling. And also, you have such a wonderful sense of humor around things that we need in order to be able to get through things.
Yeah.
So, you know, that to me has also been, like, you're one of the women in my life that I look up to, that I'm like, here's a true role model for me.
Aw, that is the nicest thing. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I really do appreciate that. It is nice to hear that, because we all have, you know, our insecurities. And so to hear that, I don't know, you feel that way means a lot. So
well, I mean,
you.
okay, so really though, when you told me, for example, that you had sent your hardest climb after you had Marissa, and tell me again how old you were when you sent that climb and which climb it was, because I forget. Sorry.
Well, I had Marissa when I was 43, and then the year after having her, I sent Path, which was at that time my hardest climb. But then I continued to, like, I had set a goal for myself of 50 513s by the time I was 50, and also a 514 by the time I was 50. So I figured the 50 513s would be building the appropriate base. Yeah. I might be a little old school with my base building, possibly.
Love it. No, I think it makes perfect sense.
So I hit the goal of the 50 513s by 50, and at 48, I sent a new hardest route, which was, I sent two 13Ds that summer, which was Tomb Raider and Magnatar. And Tomb Raider was my number 50.
Oh my God.
So then the goal was to hit the 514, except then life took a turn.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
You know, so we have unexpected turns in the road. So I'm back on track though, and still have that goal. It's
And you're climbing so well. You're climbing so well. I mean, I've been seeing you crushing the summer and rifle. And that's the other thing I was about to say. You know, we are talking about age today. And rifle is such a perfect example of just all the ages being represented crushing. 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds.
12-year-olds.
Yeah.
We can't forget the 12-year-olds, the 9-year-olds. The up and coming.
The ones that like watch the YouTube video, come to rifle, and then just like start flashing all the climbs.
Yeah. And the ones who I tried to watch their YouTube video for beta, and it did me absolutely no good to watch the 12-year-old on Apocalypse for beta. I had to find my own way up there. God. Well, I actually had a lot of great women that were working Apocalypse this summer.
That was true. That was a pretty fun lineup. I mean, definitely a lineup and some waiting, but that helps. It really does.
Oh, it cuts a lot of the time out as far as figuring the beta out.
Yeah.
I mean, you just share, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
And it makes the process, though, so much fun.
It's so funny because I actually, now thinking about it, in Spain, I feel the same way as far as that age representation goes. Because I have a lot of friends in their 50s just still crushing, you know, like really having goals and really, you know, moving forward in their climbing. And I think I actually have more older friends there, I think, than younger ones here. I feel like it really does feel very balanced between both. Like you hang out with younger people, you hang out with older people, you hang out with people your age. That is definitely something that I want to talk about today, because maybe the climbing community is a very specific group of people in society where age becomes a little bit of a different thing. You know, maybe if you don't have an athletic goal, or you don't have this, like, you know, community that is so diverse, it feels like you're just kind of in your age doing your thing. Mm-hmm. And climbing is a little bit more, we're like, oh, where am I? Well, it doesn't really matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, because as you were saying that, I was just thinking, there are so many people that I know that I have absolutely no idea what their age is. Like, they could be 23 or they could be 35. Like, I just don't think about it as much, because we're all doing the same thing.
And that's what connects us. And I mean, I feel like you're like one of my closest friends here, and I keep having to ask you how old you are. And I feel like you just asked me the other day how old I am. And it's like, it's not that we're trying to ignore the fact that we have a certain age. It's just that it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And I felt that way, you know, with my dance company, where I had a lot of dancers that were younger. But I also had dancer my age, and even one that was older. And it felt ageless.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
Because our goal was to step on stage and just dance our asses off and do our best. And we were a family.
Yep. You have the same goal. And so, like you said, maybe when you don't have that common goal, your stages of life are more noticeable. Yeah. Like when I go pick Marissa up at school, well, even there it's interesting too, because I am on the older side of having a child in an elementary school.
Right.
But we're still like all on the hill waiting for our kids to get out of school doing the same thing, you know? And it's kind of like we're all parents.
Yeah.
And so I guess I don't really look at, when I'm in that environment, I'm not really looking at people like, oh, they're so much younger to be a parent, I'm so much older to be a parent. Like, we're all just parents there.
Yeah.
So that typically makes us a little bit older.
Yeah.
You know, we're not like typically like with, you know, elementary school kids, you're not in your early 20s anymore. So
right.
we're a little bit older. But I don't know. Yeah, I think away from climbing, age does sort of, it becomes more like defined, or it becomes more obvious, I guess, how old people actually are based on what they're doing or where they are in their lives.
Yeah.
Whereas when we walk into the canyon, it's like that all drops away.
Yeah.
Because half the time we don't even know what people are doing in their everyday lives. All we know is what their project is and what their project was last year.
Yes. so true. Yeah, Elke is another one of those people that I'm inspired by.
She's amazing.
She's a crusher. I don't
love
know
her.
how old she is. I have no idea.
No idea. Either.
No idea.
I just know she's strong.
She's the strong one. She keeps crushing.
And motivated.
Yeah.
Strong and motivated.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I was preparing for today, I thought about the word ageism, which is basically the definition is like discrimination based on age. I didn't even know that word existed until I listened to Stephen Dimmitt's interview with Carol Simpson, which I believe I listened to this spring. I highly recommend that episode. And she is a 70-year-old yoga instructor, and she started climbing at age 40 and was hit with this criticism from, I believe, other mothers in her daughter's school who just said basically, like, you're starting to rock climb at age 40. Aren't you a little too old for that? And she was like, fuck no. Like, I just discovered climbing on my own and I love it. And she had her goals. And now she's, in her 70s. She has her own yoga studio. She lives in California in the Sierras. And she really went into the experience of becoming an older woman in the climbing community and some of the discrimination she experienced at the crag, where, some young 20-year-old would walk up and be like, oh, the old lady over there on the 512, whatever, like these kind of comments. I was like, wow, that is kind of messed up. I didn't realize that word was actually a word. But then I realized that I had experienced something similar where last summer somebody said to me, and ironically, this person is in their late 50s, oh, you did Pamparama at age 40? Because I'd just done Pamparama and I was all psyched, and then it was my birthday. And he's like, oh, you did Pamparama at age 40? Congratulations. And I was just hit with this. Was that a compliment?
I think it was. I know it was, in fact. I know who it was.
Yeah. I know, I think I told you.
It was
and
a
I'm
compliment.
like, it was a compliment, but it just felt so like, oh, it's all downhill from now kind of comment.
Oh my gosh. Yes, you're just getting started. Though.
Yeah, I know, exactly. I'm just getting started. And so I was like, all right, hold on tight. And then, Colette and I had this conversation. She's trying Simply Red, and she's obviously crushing. And this photographer that was like really impressed with her because they had done some kind of a filming with Nick. I can't remember. They were in the canyon, and this photographer was like asking her about the route because he didn't really know so much about rifle. And then he's like, may I ask you how old you are? And Colette was like, fuck yeah. Like, I'm 40, or I don't even know how old she is, 40, 41. I see, this is what happens. Like, I literally lose track. And some other guy at the crag was like, dude, this is not something that you ask. And Colette was like, why? Like, why should I be ashamed of my age? Why should that be a taboo question? To like tiptoe around the fact that we're all going to get older and die. Like, again.
Yeah, that's great that she feels that way too. Because it is. I feel like it's hard when you hit that like 30 and then 40 and then 50. It's like the entry into the next decade.
Right.
I actually struggle with that a little bit. It's like when I'm in my late 30s, I've already settled with the fact that I'm in my 30s. Okay, I've accepted. I've been here for how many years now, But then when you have to bump into the next like 40, you're now like you have to kind of
readjust.
Yes, and readjust. And so that's awesome that she just out of the gates is like, yeah, because I feel like I had to settle into 40 where I almost like tried to hide it for a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I hope nobody asks me my age because I'm not in my 30s anymore. Like now I'm going to have to say 40. But then after, a little while, it usually doesn't take very long, then you're like, yeah, whatever. That's just what it is. And there's no reason to be ashamed or embarrassed, but it happened the same thing with 50. I'm like, oh my gosh, hopefully people still think I'm in my 40s. Like for whatever reason, I have no idea why.
Yeah, it's just a number, but it is like a transition.
It's a transition, and it's almost like you have to get used to the idea somehow. But now I'm just like, yeah, I'm 52. it doesn't bother me anymore. But it did, I think, a little bit at first when I turned 50. Mm-hmm. It didn't really bother me. It's just I didn't really want other people to necessarily know or ask.
Yeah, let's not talk about it. Let's not talk about age. And it does make it easier to just feel like we're all the same age. Like whether it's a few more, a few less, that it helps not to put a number to it. So I do understand that, and I felt that way when I turned 40. I'm like, all right, like, here we go. I talked to my mom about it, and she actually said that for her the 40s wasn't such a thing because she didn't, but I think the 50 was where she was like, all right, like something shifted there, where she felt a little bit more aware of that number. And it's interesting what you say about that, because this is again something Colette and I talked about when she told me that story, how for 20-year-olds 30 sounds old, for 30-year-olds 40 sounds old, for 40-year-olds 50, and so on. And, we were just saying how you cannot walk up to a 25-year-old and be like, oh, no, 35 is not old. You know what I mean?
They're not.
I mean, that's not your job, and that's not their job. Mm-hmm. Their job is to go through those ages. And when they turn 35, they'll realize like, wow, it's ever changing. It's transient, and age is going to continue doing this to me, and same with my parents that are now, in their 70s, and my dad is about to turn 80, and he's like, wow, like I'm old. And again, it's just like this whole realizing of that's just, how it goes. But until you get there, again, for a 30-year-old, 40 just sounds old because it is 10 years ahead. It feels far away.
Yes.
And then you get there, and until that person gets there. But that's why, again, I think having these conversations and making them accessible at least gives people like a point of reference, like, oh, something to think about. Like I felt when I listened to Carol Simpson talk to Steven, where I'm like, wow, she's in her 70s. She's still has her own yoga studio. She's still going out there and climbing. And yeah, 70, I mean, does sound old to me because I'm in my early 40s, but it is a reality that if I'm lucky, I will get to.
Yes. Yep. And then it's nice to have role models and people that inspire you. Mm-hmm. And I think back to like, oh, what was my mom doing when I was 52? And it's so wildly different than where I am right now.
Right.
Like at my 52, I have a 9-year-old. At my mom's 52, she had a 32-year-old.
Wow.
I mean, and it's just so different. And I look at, I don't know, I guess it's just because I am so close to my parents and I'm so curious, like, well, what were they doing when they were my age?
Yeah.
And it's just different. And I think that's probably why I don't feel 52. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, we're still, Michael, Marissa and I are still out traveling and climbing, and we put a high priority on adventure and, just having fun and getting out there. So I think that's maybe not a typical, in our society, 52-year-old attitude, maybe. Hopefully it is, but
and maybe that
sure.
is changing and shifting. And again, depending on like what kind of community you surround yourself with, right? Like again, the climbing community, I think, makes that more the norm.
Yeah.
And because I see a lot of other families with kids still doing the climbing and the traveling and new priorities. Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, because I feel like you had, when we spoke, I believe at the beginning of the year, you're like, we have this motto for this year because the last few years have been a little stressful, and it's gratitude. Let me see if I can remember.
Okay.
Gratitude, simplicity. Shit. What was
That's it.
That was,
just
there we go.
simplicity and gratitude. Yeah.
And I was like, I love that as a family, you come together and you set this motto.
Yeah, I think it was a really important one because, like you touched on a little bit, the last couple of years have been challenging. And I know that has been for everybody with everything that's gone on in really the world. But even in our personal lives, just, with my mom, she got one minute she was traveling in Spain with us for 6 weeks. And then, it seemed like just very shortly after that, she got sick. And so she came to live with us and we took care of her. So that was a big, just a big commitment. And it was something that was also really important to us. But it took a lot of time and strength and energy, and raising a 9-year-old while also having a parent that, we were taking care of. It was challenging to be stuck in the middle. And in fact, Chloe, Chloe.
Yeah, I love Chloe.
She had a phrase for it, and she said the French call it, she had the French name, but it's called the sandwich generation, where you're in the middle of raising your children while also, taking care of your parents, your elderly parents. And my mom was 72. So she really, like all this, the conversation that we've had so far, really she was not, relatively speaking, that old. Like I said, she had just been traveling in Spain with us for 6 weeks and was, walking all over Valencia and hanging out with Marissa while we were climbing. So she was a very young 70 at heart as well. So I don't know where I was really going. We
were just talking
simplicity
about
and gratitude.
And
then just a lot of loss with some other friends. And so really when we were able to get back out and go to Spain again last January, that's when that motto kind of came about. Like just being grateful for every moment, heading out to go climbing and it's raining. And it's not exactly how we pictured it. And the reality is we're in Spain and we're like together, Michael, Marissa, and myself, and we can make it whatever we want to make it, And so that's really something that I started to think a lot about. Like you should be grateful.
Yeah.
And I really do feel that way now. Like it's sometimes easy to just kind of get lost in how you expect things to go or what your vision was of how something was supposed to turn out. And I don't know, I'm just trying to let that go a little bit more and realize that we're really lucky.
And I think that is the underlying beauty behind our conversation on getting older and mortality and death, is that it does allow, if you let it, to really go deep and realize how precious our lives are, and that we are so lucky to be in these bodies. It doesn't matter how old, how wrinkly, how many gray hairs, it's like, wow, we're so lucky, because when that is gone, it's gone. That body is gone, and you can believe in afterlife and reincarnation and a lot of different things. And I do, in some ways, believe in reincarnation, but that doesn't matter. Our lives here are limited, and our bodies have a timeline. It's just how it is. And when you go through something that you did, it is so hard and so deep and so ground shaking in that sense that it can really rearrange your priorities and your values, which that is the beautiful aspect of it.
It is. And I think I learned a lot of that from my mom. Yeah. She really was one who was ageless. I
got to experience her in Spain. We went to Rodear, all of us, and it was so wonderful. And I loved her, and she loved Pata. It was
she did.
She was such an endearing human being. I felt like she was almost like a mom figure to me in some ways.
That's how she was.
She takes you in that love and that heart with a sense of humor and a lightheartedness.
She's so open and just open to anything. She's so adventurous.
That's where you get it from.
I learned all that from
That's
her.
Where you get that all from.
And I really did, just watching her go through, she had pulmonary fibrosis. So that is a disease. I don't know if you're very familiar with it, but it typically people are given 3 to 5 years once they're diagnosed. And she just never felt sorry for herself. She occasionally things got hard and you could tell it would get a little bit frustrating because things were harder, but she never lost hope.
Yeah.
She just always stayed so positive, and it was such an inspiration for me to watch her go through that. And she was just so graceful the entire time. And then I learned so much from her going through this with her, because we've always been really close. So, we've always traveled together and adventured, and she's probably been to more climbing areas than a lot of, climbers have been. She's been to Spain and all over the U.S. She's been to Vita and Cathedral Ledges and the New and the Red and Rifle. She was a regular at Rifle every year. So she was just adventurous. And that's how she was through the process of, really her illness and eventually her death. She was open, which is...
It's very admirable. And I hear this in, my spiritual teachings and Buddhism and yoga and these practices of... a yoga instructor told me this once. She was saying how... I don't know if these are not the exact words, but everything kind of prepares us for death. All of our practices that we practice in yoga or whatever your practice is, meditation practices, these are all practices that help us prepare for the most challenging and the most beautiful and the most transcending moment, which is death. Mm-hmm. And how you I don't think deal with it is the best word, but how you are in it.
It's a journey.
It's a journey.
And it's how you kind of progress through it, and how okay you are with it.
Yeah, the letting go.
Accepting.
The letting go, the surrendering. Because isn't that really the spiritual practice? Is every day we try to surrender, we try to accept, let go of the things that we are not in control of, all these things that we try to remind ourselves on a day-to-day basis to stay sane within all the stresses of, modern life. And then it comes to that real moment where it's okay, where are you at with that practice? Are you really willing to surrender? That is going to be the biggest moment of surrender.
Yeah. Yeah, you nailed it, I would say. And watching someone go through that, it's so intimate to go through that with somebody. And I went through that with my grandma as well, as I know you also did. And I was very close to her also. So I think that helped prepare me for my mom's death, which, I was also there helping care for my grandma. And I was very close to her. She and I were so close growing up. I lived with them at times, and so yeah, it is. It's a difficult process, but I do think it's helpful to have just people who have done it gracefully and beautifully and so well. It's just, it sounds strange to say that, but I don't know, somehow it just makes me feel better in the end, I guess, knowing that my mom was okay with where she was.
And I was about to say, because I feel that is something that supports you, because the process was really hard and still is hard for you as well. So to be going through it with somebody that you love so dearly, but seeing their strength and seeing their ability to be present with it must be helpful. Because I think about my dad, for example, who is a very rational German. He's not necessarily super spiritual. He doesn't, believe in God and talk about afterlife or anything like this. Anything where it'd be there's a little nugget. It's more I'm getting older, my body's not working. I can't do the things that I love to do, that I used to do, because he was a big time athlete, and now he has real issues with his back and shooting pain in his leg. And it's so hard for me to see him go through it. And it's even harder to see him struggling with it, right? If he was a little bit more in that, what you describe about your mom, I think it might make it a little easier for me to accept. But seeing him struggle, I just want to take that away from him. Like, I just wish I could take away that struggle and that pain.
Yeah, and just let him ease into it
Yeah,
and be okay.
yeah.
But it is hard. I mean, it's even now, getting older in my own body, things have changed.
Right.
And it's a difficult thing when you have to go through those changes and accept. And then you have to question, like, do I have to accept this, or is this just a phase and I can change it?
Right.
Because you can sometimes make the changes, but then it sounds like with, maybe where your dad is, he is older and his back limits him. Yeah. And so my dad is similar situation where, he's actually a great example where he couldn't run for, I can't remember exactly, but like probably the last 10 to 15 years, he was a runner his whole life and his back started bothering him. And this summer he's been running.
Wow.
But it's only because he's been able to shift his expectations of what running looks like to him. Because he always had every single day, he had his journal, he knew how many miles he ran, what the temperature was, he had all the stats written down and what his splits were. And so it was really important to him. And then when he couldn't run the way he kind of wanted to run, or he was in pain, he had to completely stop and use like the elliptical at the gym. But then he shifted it and he kept all his stats in his journal for that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then just this summer he called me and told me he went for a run, and I was so excited for him.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's great.
And then there are those moments of gratitude, because I do know with my dad, it's kind of been up and down for the last few years with his back and stuff. And then he was in Germany and he visited his friend in northern Germany to go hunting, and he had like the best time ever. And they even went golfing, because then they can just use the cart, and like he doesn't have to do all the walking, which is the most painful part. And he was like, now he got his electrical bike and he's like going everywhere, and he's like, yeah, it's like really. And so when those moments happen, we're like, you're finding your way of being in it, and in your stage of life, with what you can.
Yep.
Right. And I feel like we'll all get to that with our climbing. There will be a point in our lives where, I can't see myself quitting completely. And then listening to Carol Simpson talking about climbing at age 70 and still going to the crag, and like, yeah, your climbing changes, but I don't think that I'll stop loving it, and unless you are in excruciating pain, of course.
Right. And then, you do have to
adjust,
accept and adjust, and maybe find a different way.
Yeah.
But, like Lee Sheftel is another excellent example.
Yes.
Like still in the canyon and crushing out there.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of good role models.
Yeah. I was going back to your mom, not to dwell on losing your mom, but I appreciated the conversations we had about that this summer, because as you know, when I came back from Montana, I was having a really vulnerable time. Because basically while I was up there, and it was like the longest trip I've done in a while, I really spent a good amount of time with my parents up there and helped my mom on her land, like clearing bushes and getting to the corners that she can't get to anymore because they're so steep and scary. And, Pata helping build stairs with my dad, who was like the supervisor. And it was a really precious and beautiful time. But I was trying to explain to you this weird, like double sensation of like beauty and love and so much joy to spend this like very quality time with him. And then at the same time, this like deep-seated sadness of like, oh my gosh, time is fleeting, because I can see them getting older. I can see them getting more vulnerable. And this feeling of like, I should be here more. I should be up here more helping. Like, I wish I had two Isabels, one living her life and one just up there clearing the land and fixing the things and making sure nobody falls down the stairs, because they have a lot of stairs to go down to the lake. And it was almost like this strange, like as if I was watching myself from the future place, like this projected nostalgia where you're in it and it's wonderful and it's painful at the same time.
Yes.
It is so... it's hard for me to explain, but like where at the end of the day I would sit on the dock and look out on the lake and remember, of course, all my childhood years in that place where also I spent with my grandma. And she passed when I was 38, and that was already really hard because her land, which was right, up the hill, was sold. So there went like one entire piece of history, like 38 years, boom.
That's so hard to see too.
Oh my God, it was devastating.
Yes, I felt that with my grandparents' home, which was basically the home I knew from the time I was born.
Yeah, same.
The one constant.
Steady.
And when it's really difficult to let that go.
Hard.
It's like it's a part of your life that you've let go
It felt like
somehow.
something was being torn out of my heart.
Yes. Yeah, I'm so sorry. Like, that had to be so hard.
It was. And then, here I am sitting on my parents' property looking out on the lake. And again, like seeing how they're, getting older and just more vulnerable. And, the roles are shifting a bit. I mean, they're still very independent and they're still going back and forth from Montana to Germany every year, which is impressive. But,
definitely.
I'm like, oh my God, they're still doing the double life. The double life is freaking me out now. How are they still doing that in their 70s? But yeah, it was a very beautiful time. And it was also, for some reason, it just left me sad or just like, I don't know, maybe scared. Like it's a good reminder of like when that happens, you're like, where am I at in my life? What is, like you're like, all these things are shifting. This place that was like so the constant and so the place, that lake where I learned how to swim, like, I mean, just all of that. And then you start realizing like, where am I at with my life? Am I making the right choices? Like, am I where I want to be? Where do I want to go? Like, what matters? And it starts just like unraveling things for your own self too, which I imagine having a daughter, it's even more so because you see the time change more quickly, right?
Yeah. It's definitely, she's a timekeeper, I guess.
Yeah.
Is that accurate? Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Like she's, through her, really the passage of time becomes very clear. Before we had her, it's like if we didn't see someone for 5 years, we'd see them again and we'd most likely be doing the same thing.
Yeah.
But when they see Marissa, they're just like, oh my gosh, the last time I saw you, Marissa was just starting to walk. Right. And now she's in 4th grade and 9 and climbing, I mean, it just running around the canyon.
And making earrings.
Making jewelry, selling jewelry with Foster. It's like,
my gosh.
She makes it very apparent, especially when we haven't seen someone, how much time has passed. And just from year to year with her growth and development and the things she says to me, she's so wise for a 9-year-old. And sometimes I just think like, where does she get this? I think she's an old soul though. Mm-hmm. I mean, what were we talking about today? She told me she has not quite harnessed her potential. And I thought, that is so wise. Oh my God. I want to learn from you. Can you be my guru?
Harness my potential. Wait, how old is she? 9?
9.
Oh my God, that is so cute.
I know, I love it.
You should write that into your diary so that, again, when the tables turn, she can hopefully go through your diary and remember that that's what she said at
on the way to school.
9.
Just a conversation. She said, I came home, I had to tell Michael, she said like 3 amazing things that were so insightful and wise for a 9-year-old.
Yeah.
She spent a lot of time with my mom. Maybe that's what
I
she
know,
got
and
it.
you. I mean, all of it. It's like the woman generation here, I mean, Michael's also awesome, but you were just talking about like your grandma and your mom and you and Marissa's the continuation of that, and it always is growing, right? Like hopefully we're always evolving our minds, our hearts, our like awareness, because, if we want this humanity to go into a good direction, we'd hope that, most of these kids are not just sitting in front of the computer all day, but like actually like becoming more aware.
Yeah.
And more wise. Just like you were saying, wow, what was my mom doing when she was my age versus what I'm doing, right? Like that's also shifting.
Yeah. It's just a different time.
It is a very different time. I mean, I feel like seeing your daughter getting older and being reminded of your age has like a more positive connotation in the sense of, you know, you're seeing somebody that has come from you grow and flourish. And I mean, there will be ups and downs, of course, you know, and moments that are sad for her or hard for her. But in general, you're seeing this life grow versus like, you know, the reminder that comes from your parents getting older. It's like that, it's a sadder reminder because it's reminding you of like, it is going to be time, who knows when that will be, to let go of this part of my life, of the part of like, my parents are going to be around forever. They're strong. They're the strong ones. They're the ones that are like the home base. Like
they take care of me.
They take care of me.
Even when I'm an adult.
Yeah, exactly.
They take care of me.
Yes.
I mean, I could call my mom, I could talk to her every single day because I always needed her for something every day of my life.
100%. I'm like, Mom, I'm having so many marital issues. I want to get a divorce. Like, I can't do this anymore. And they're like, all right, that's gonna be fine.
Let's
just
talk
like
this
talk
over before you just run off and do that.
Yeah.
Let's maybe think about it.
Oh my God. It is so funny. And then and that's their role for so many years. So then when those things change, it's just really difficult to accept, you know?
It's so hard. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I seriously go to call my mom. Still, you know, it's like it was just every day I had something I had to tell her, you know? So it's.
Yeah, and grief is like so interesting because I feel like it just never goes away. Like we were talking about that the other day, I think, where I was saying it changes in nature.
Yes.
And it maybe goes through waves, but in general, there's probably like a general like tendency of the acute pain becoming less. Like I remember when my grandma died and she, you know, I was there with her. It was actually really shitty because I was there a lot, especially during college because, you know, I wasn't in Germany anymore. So it was like very easy for me to be up in Montana, and I loved that place. So I spent my summers there. I had my summer job. I would stay with her. It was always very, you know, just like familiar feeling. And she was so young. I mean, she was 102 when she died, and she was completely with it until the very end. Like still reading and still, I mean, just incredible woman, died in her own bed in her own house, like incredible human being. But they had told me that she wasn't doing well. And, you know, it wasn't the first time that she had like a little lull. And I was like, okay, how important is this? Should I fly? Should I not fly? And I was going back and forth. Anyways, finally picked a flight and landed in Kalispell. I'm driving to her house and my aunt calls me and says she just passed away.
Oh, Isabel.
And I was just beside myself and obviously like beat myself up plenty of times. And I got to the house and it was just her and the caretaker who was a friend of ours who was staying with her at the time. And I like walked straight into the house and straight to the bedroom, and they were just like, you just go. They knew I just needed to just be with her, you know. Yeah. So I went into her bedroom. I laid next to her for hours. For whatever reason, and I kind of feel lucky about it, it took them a long time to come and get her. So I was in that room with her, and it was my first time really being with a dead body, dead person. And so that was groundbreaking for me. I'm very grateful for that experience. She was still warm to the touch because it had just happened. And there was a part of me that feels like she wanted it that way, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
I feel like she just wanted, you know, and it's hard to accept when you're like, but I could have been there for those last moments to understand that's no longer an option. And here I am with you laying on the bed. I mean, I talked to her. I apologize for being there late.
You know what, though? I think sometimes everybody has their own process, and she maybe needed to be alone.
Yeah, and I think she was, because she was the kind of person that got annoyed with people, and she was really honest about it too. I think I told you the story about the person that came to interview her. So she turned 100 in Big Fork, Montana. That's a big deal, you know. And she was like well known. She was a writer and author and like well-traveled woman in the community. And this person came to interview her for the newspaper. And she sat there and, after a while, it was just like, just looked over at the person and was like, yeah, I think it's time for you to go now.
That is so awesome.
And so I think you're right. I think she was on her own agenda always. And so the interesting part was like the following days, I got to spend a lot of time in her room and in her house by myself, going through things and just sleeping in her bed. And there was something really special about that because I felt like her energy was lingering. Mm-hmm. And so I just, I would like stay in bed forever, like look at the view that she had. I hadn't changed a sheet or anything. I just laid in her bed and slept in her bed and like went through her some things. And I started going through photo albums and those days were, they were special in their own way. She wasn't physically there, but I felt like I was somehow still spending
with her.
Time with her.
And I think that part of the process is so important too. I mean, I think for a lot of people, it's so hard.
Right.
So it's easier to avoid it or run away or you need to move on with your life. Mm-hmm. But we are very much the same way, with my mom. She stayed in the house.
Can I just
hours.
say that we're sitting on the bed?
I know we're
We're sitting on the bed, on your mom's bed, in your mom's room, in your house, and it's just the coziest place.
I know. We love this room.
This room is and we're looking at the butterflies and painted on the fence out there and this beautiful view. So sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
No, this is our safe space in the house.
Yeah.
When we miss her. We just come in here and we hang out. Marissa especially loves to come into Grandma's room and have sleepovers in here. So that's what we do when we're sad and we're missing her. And she's still, she's all around. She's had a big presence when she was alive, and she still has a big presence.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard. Everyone also goes through the loss and processing it in their own way. Mm-hmm. And so different. Like what you're describing is very much how I am when I've lost my mom or my grandma, lying with her. And that was really important for me to make sure Marissa knew that when they were going to take my mom away, that was going to be the last time she would see her physically. Mm-hmm. And she was 7 at the time. Oh my God. That's a big conversation to have with the 7-year-old. And also not wanting her to feel she has to do it one way or the other. Like we really wanted her to know they are going to take Grandma away later today. And so some people want to spend time with that person and they feel very comfortable touching them and talking to them and being with them. And for other people, that's not how they want to remember them. Mm-hmm. And that's okay too. And it's, we just tried to go through the different ways people will grieve and handle the situation and let her make her own mind up. Yeah. I didn't want to tell her what was right or what was wrong, but I did tell her what I felt comfortable with. And then she also saw how I interacted with my mom when she was gone.
So you stayed obviously with your mom and
oh yes. I mean I was lying with her the whole night. Yeah. I mean I slept with her the last couple nights before she died. Just because I wanted to be with her and I also wanted to make sure if she needed anything I was there. And she probably about an hour before she died, she squeezed my hand because I was upset, I mean, I knew it was the end. And I was crying, but I didn't want her to know I was crying because I wanted her to know it was okay to go when
Right.
she was ready, and I didn't want her to feel like she had to still take care of me,
Yeah.
you know? So she squeezed my hand and she said, Chris, she could barely, I mean, she hadn't spoken like at all that day, and she somehow mustered up the energy to say, Chris, you worried too much. It's okay. And then that was the last thing she said. And, you know, she was still lying for probably another hour before. I think I must have felt or known she needed to be alone, because I did get up and I walked out of the room to go. I think I went to text her sister, or there was something about her sister that I needed to look at, or I wanted to see.
Yeah.
And so I was literally out of the room for 2 minutes, and I heard her take her last breath.
Oh.
I mean, and I think she just she wanted
to be alone.
Like, as much as, and I don't feel sad about that. It's like the same thing with my grandpa. He wanted to be alone the second I walked out of the room. And I don't feel like I was like smothering her or suffocating her. I think she loved having me there. I know she did. We were holding hands and she squeezed my hand. But I think she just needed that time
Yeah.
to do it
Yeah.
when I maybe wasn't there.
Yeah.
And so...
And I do, hearing you say that, it makes me really think of my grandma and how independent and how much she cherished her alone time. And then I think about myself, how much I love being alone. And I could see myself wanting to die alone, like being surrounded by loved ones. But then when it comes time to have that experience, it might...
The last moment.
Yeah, just like... to make it your journey and not about somebody else and their need to be with you or hold your hand or smother you. Like you said, I think that independent people or women like us that, we cherish our alone time, I could see how that would, now I'm like really starting to reflect on how that would be a thing, because my friend Susan, who lost her mom very young to cancer, the same thing happened. They were there the whole time. And the family left because they finally needed to get something to eat in their tummy. And right as they left the hospital was like... And
I almost even wonder, like, it's for them. I mean, hopefully in your last moments, that's what you need.
Yeah.
But I also wonder if it's also because she just didn't want me to have to...
Yeah, to go through that.
Because she was always thinking about other people.
Yeah.
But I do also believe, like you said...
I think it's a combination.
I think it is too. I think she really did need to just... She was ready and wanted to do it on her own.
Yeah. Yeah, because my aunt was at the house and she was with my grandma, and she said she had left the room. And she was there, and I could have been there, and I could have also gone to the bathroom. I mean... The fact of the matter is you're not going to be with them every minute. And if they have control over that, which it seems like, I think there is some conscious or subconscious decision.
I do too. I totally believe that. And the other thing that's important to remember is you feel like you needed to be there physically at the very end, but you were there your entire life.
Right.
For her and with her. And she knows that and she felt that. And so I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind.
Yeah.
That you can't beat yourself up for that.
Yeah.
I know it's hard
It
because you
is.
had the way that you wanted it
Like
to
you
go.
said, we wanted to, and then life comes, and then you're like, okay, gratitude and simplicity. To go back to what you were saying, inspired that motto. Life doesn't always give us exactly what we want, especially in those kind of moments. Yeah. And I do feel like I transitioned during those days, because I stayed for several days, where the next day, because this happened at night when I got there, and then the next day I spent hours down at the lake, and I watched what I still think until this day, the most amazing sunset I have ever seen in Montana. And this is like, having spent 38 years up there. I mean, the sunset was alive. It was constantly changing. I just couldn't get my eyes off of it. I just couldn't leave the lake. And I knew it was her saying goodbye.
Yeah.
It was clouds and then no clouds and the craziest color combinations. I was just sitting there on the dock and just like talking to her and crying. And it was like so obvious that there was still grandma.
Yeah.
And that she will always be there.
That is so beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, that's with my mom. It was a full moon that night. And that's how I knew. I knew.
Oh, I love full moons.
My mom loved full moons. Like, she always talked about full moons.
Oh.
So the second I looked out the window and realized, because you're just so caught up, you don't realize what's going on around you. You know, I had no idea it was a full moon that night until I looked out the window and saw it like starting to rise. And I'm like,
Oh my God. There she
hey,
is.
this is it. This is it.
Oh, that's so precious.
So,
Thank you for sharing such vulnerable stuff. I mean, I guess we both kind of went into it. We were
did. We're like, we're not going to talk about this because it's too hard.
We're going to talk about rock climbing and wrinkles and Botox.
Yeah,
Here we are. And it is actually interesting because I was, thinking about, and that's, one thing that when I sat down to reflect on today's episode, I was like, it's all so related. It's also related that on the outside, quote unquote, we are told younger is better, right? Like it's stronger, it's this, it's more beautiful. And so we like do all these things to try to look this and that. But, the deeper lying sentiment that I see going on is that we just don't want to deal with the deeper reality of death and mortality and letting go. And yes, it's true. We all want to look good. That's, we're vain. We're all humans. I mean, I personally am not into Botox. I'm never going to do that stuff. I'm like, that sounds very scary.
It does sound scary.
But,
and maybe I understand addictive. Like if you do it once, it's not a one and done type thing.
I'm like,
but I don't know.
Me. I don't know either. And I'm also like so weirded out by needles in my face and toxic things, because it's like, I really like to do Kundalini yoga. So there's a lot of like chakra work and like the third eye, right?
Yeah.
Like the idea of putting toxins in my third eye. I'm like, that just sounds like numbing the one thing that gives me kind of some sort of like sanity. I know, a little bit counterproductive. So not going down that road. But believe me, I'm like, oh, is this vitamin E cream going to do the trick? You know, you're like, up in there, let's go.
I'll try that one. Creams. Totally on board.
Oh my God. Or, just like, making sure you're looking good. You're like, yeah, I got my cute little new top or something. And I get it. Like, who are we kidding? We're all trying to look good and getting old.
Feel good.
And feel good.
Then you're confident.
Exactly.
And the more
it's a
confident
whole
you
thing.
are. Yes.
And that's totally like, but then, okay, so that's like one thing. And the reality of that is like you said, our bodies will continue changing and continue changing and continue changing. And that's just it. And like continue, taking off these layers and this accepting and surrendering. But I do think that the work that we can really do in the meantime, while we're still putting on our vitamin E creams, is that is like really like going a bit deeper. And I think for that, this stopping, because our society also like we're always going, we always have goals to like really reflect. And be with something that is uncomfortable. I think that to me is a practice. And I'm not great at it, believe me. And this is why I like drag my ass to yoga class or like, listen to some guided meditations on my phone, because they kind of force me to then be like, okay, take this time out, just stop and be. And allow yourself, whether it's like, anxieties of where I'm at in my life. Am I doing the right thing? Am I making the right choice of, currently I'm not planning on having a baby. Is this, all these bigger things. My parents are getting older. Where are they going to retire? What am I going to do when they need me? These underlying deeper things that we like to kind of shove away until, like you said, it happens and you deal with them and you have no choice. How can we integrate them in a healthy way where, aside from these beautiful conversations that that we've had, for example, how can we integrate that into our lives where we can start sitting with that,
Yeah, because I do think a lot of times too, it's important to not push them away and to make the conscious decision so that down the road, you made the choice. Mm-hmm. You didn't just ignore it and now have a regret.
Right.
That's really where Michael and I were when we decided whether we were going to start a family or not.
Right. I
Yeah.
remember this because you said, we're fine. We're just doing our thing. But I think you were the one who was like, okay, let's actually make a decision.
I wanted a decision.
And not just continue doing what we know.
Yeah,
Right.
because that would have been so easy. I
So
mean,
easy.
we were traveling, we were climbing, we both had, jobs where we made decent money. And so we could just travel. We had some freedom. We had flexibility in our jobs.
Yeah.
And so it was great. We had each other.
Yeah.
And it seemed like, okay, this I think a life of this would be awesome. But then again, I had always seen myself with kids, probably two, because I grew up with a brother. But I was never at the right time in my life. It was always like, when I was 27, it'd probably happen when I'm like in my early 30s. And when I was in my early 30s, by my mid 30s, then I did meet Michael. Like it was always just, eventually. And then I started to wonder, like, well, maybe I don't really want to have children.
Right.
Like I haven't had kids yet. And I met Michael when I was 36. So I started to wonder, like, I don't know, maybe it's just not for me. And then when we got together, we had so much fun together that we went on like that, for a good 4 to 5 years before I really started to realize we need to decide one way or the other. When I met him, I knew immediately that I did want to have
His babies.
His babies.
'Cause he's
his baby.
One, yeah.
Well, I think maybe at the time I was just open to the idea, but
Right.
he's younger than I am. And he wasn't there. He wasn't thinking about that. He was just excited about the relationship and climbing. And so I would, occasionally bring up, is this something, you're interested in? What are you thinking? And we'd never go very far with the conversation until I was, I think at 41, I finally thought, we have to make a decision one way or the other. No pressure, because I also didn't want to be in a relationship where I pushed for something the other person didn't want. And now that's a really big decision to make.
Yes.
And now we've got resentment and regret.
Yeah,
that we're
probably the
dealing
biggest
with.
decision you can make in a relationship.
So I tried to balance it out between figuring out, where was I? How important was it to me? I got to the point where I realized I had tipped beyond the 50% marker.
Right.
And so I was, but I wasn't 100%. I didn't know for certain, but I thought it would be a great thing for us to do together. So that's when we finally, he decided, I think I was 42 when we had the conversation, and he was like, all right.
Chrissy, what are you trying to say? I'm 42.
Do this. No, I'm not telling you anything.
I'm kidding.
I wouldn't tell you what
if
to do.
anything is tipping, if anything starts tipping, I will make sure to not only call you, we'll have to have a follow-up conversation because that's like a whole nother thing. Because I'm in that like, no, it's all good. Like, that's not, and our lives have been so crazy. As you know,
Yes,
you've been
I
in
know.
it with
You
me.
can't think.
Like,
you two can't be in the same place.
We can't even
right
be in
now
the same place
for
right
some
now.
reason,
He's like, for
so-
some reason, he's always traveling. Now he's traveling with work, and we want to kind of be in Spain. And Grand Junction has been great, but we haven't had we haven't had the opportunity to find something here. So our lives have been so much moving parts and so vagabondy feeling that it just adding that would sound.
Yeah, you two just need to be in the same place first. First
Yes,
step.
First step. Let's actually be together in one place and actually be in our house and in Spain and just really just find together. But yeah, I mean, I still, and like I said, I feel like I know I'm at this age where it's like, well, people would be like, well, that's, that decision is taken care of. But, we're seeing it more and more women in their 40s. So for me, it's like, no, I don't want that in my life right now. I can't imagine having room, space, emotion for it. It's not something I'm craving, but also that might be circumstantial. And I don't want to completely close myself off. And I think, just again, seeing my parents getting older and thinking about my life, these questions sometimes come up and yeah, I guess time will tell,
Yeah, it's so different for everyone,
Yeah,
and such a
right.
personal decision to make and with your partner.
Yeah.
And yeah, everyone's situation is so unique. And so
Yeah.
I'm glad that we obviously made the choice that we did.
Yeah, Marissa is amazing.
She's so
I know.
wonderful.
If I don't have babies, then I want to be her aunt forever.
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah.
She would love that.
I know. She's always so sweet. I just see in the canyon, hi, Isabel. She'll go out of the way to make sure to say hi to me.
Yeah.
It's so mature too, because kids can be so shy.
Yeah.
But she's wonderful. And you're an amazing mom. Michael's an amazing dad.
Thanks.
You
I
guys,
feel so fortunate. He is
such a beautiful
great
family.
dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
Really, he is.
He's such a good partner to have, and I mean, he just gives so much to our family and to me and to Marissa.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's a good one.
Yeah.
For sure.
Lucky. See, lucky. The gratitude thing.
Yeah.
The gratitude thing. That's really, I think, what I'm walking away with today. And also not only gratitude for our lives and, every moment that we have, but also very grateful for this conversation. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart that you were willing to show up for this after a whole summer of trying to convince you. And I think the timing was actually perfect.
It was
I
perfect.
think it
and
had
you
to kind of
said that would happen.
The timing has to flow. It's otherwise there's the deeper thing is in its own, and it needs to kind of brew and come together, and then if it's meant to be, and this felt absolutely amazing, and I feel honored to be in your mom's room on this comfortable bed and the most safe environment to be having this conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Isabel. I really appreciate everything that you've shared and said, and I appreciate you so much. I'm glad you're here in Grand Junction with us.
Thank you.
We just need Pata here now, too.
I know. We'll be back.
Yeah.
He'll be back. And then hopefully sometime in Spain, too.
Yes.
All
I'm
of us.
looking forward to
You guys
that.
do have to come to the house at some point.
Yeah.
That'll be
hopefully
good.
this spring we'll have a trip to Spain.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Thanks. I love you.
I love you too, Isabel. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. And please feel free to send questions, comments, and topics you would like to hear about to isabel@kegelsandcoffee.com. That is ISABEL at kegelsandcoffee.com, or you can find me on Instagram under Kegels and Coffee. Take good care, stay tuned, and remember, when in doubt, drink coffee or do Kegels.